Thank you for the opportunity to speak here at Village Books today. This is my very first book, so I'm going to tell you all about it. So I'm Paula Forget, and I learned how to meditate about 18 years ago, and ever since then it really changed my life in a huge way. And when I started meditating, I wanted to write this book, but it wasn't the right time. I just didn't feel that it was time for that quite yet. And probably because I wasn't ready. I didn't know a lot of things still. I had a long way to go. So since then I've written this book, and I'm here to tell you about it. And I've also been teaching meditation. So I'm just going to share some of what I've learned with you. So my new book is called Guided to the Higher Realms. It's a personal journey of ascension through meditation. And so this book is about my journey and about how meditation changed me, how I learned to meditate from day one. And for all of us, we are all on a journey. You know, life has many twists and turns, and we never know, what's going to come next. And we kind of wonder, why are we here? Where did we come from? What is our purpose? What is this all about? And so, as we're going on our journey, what's really important? How should we react to our life? And this is a big part about what this book is about. And so when I was going through a lot of changes in my life at some point. I was having a spiritual awakening. It was kind of like an epiphany. It was like one day my heart chakra opened up and I started to feel everything. And that meant that I was feeling a lot of things that I had decided that I wasn't going to look at. Things that I might have told myself, well, I don't know if I like this, but I guess it's okay. And I don't know if I like that, but I guess it's okay. But someday I decided, once I started to feel, I realized that some things were really not okay. And I had to do something about it. And when I started to feel, when my heart chakra started to feel, it was as though I was seeing things with new, fresh eyes. I could see the beauty of the world. I could see just how marvelous all of life is. And I knew that the decisions I'd made in my life, although nothing was particularly wrong with them, there were some things that I could be doing better. And that it was time to find out, how could I be more me? Although I wasn't quite sure what that was yet. So one day, I made a lot of changes. I thought about my whole life. I spent a whole year thinking about it. And finally I decided that I was going to end a marriage after 20 years. And that was extremely difficult because I was married to my best friend. And then I moved away. I moved out of state, and I got a new job. I started a whole new career. And I decided that I would go into the arts because that's where my true talents were. Before that, I was a hotel manager, and before that, I was an insurance underwriter. So I was kind of really set into business. But I decided, since I can feel so much, I'm going to go into the arts now because that's where my true talents are. So I moved down to Gainesville, Florida, and I got a job working in an art studio as a painter. And I was renting a room in a house with other people. And one day, one of my roommates said, Paula, we're going to a potluck somewhere. How would you like to come along? And I said, sure, that would be great. So we were driving off to the potluck, but someone had to stop and drop off something with someone. They published like a little local paper, and he was going to put an ad in there. Well, he came back downstairs and he said, you know, there's something going on up there. It's kind of interesting. And it's kind of about meditation. Is anybody interested? And so we said, oh yeah, that sounds good. So I went upstairs and we went into this person's living room, and there was a group of people there. And he was giving a talk about meditation, and he was giving a talk about spirituality and about the higher self. And I had thought, gosh, that's kind of interesting. You know, to me, the higher self was kind of like this elusive thing, you know, that's just kind of way up there, you know, like how do you reach that higher self? You know, I remember back then, Shirley MacLaine would talk about, oh, I was in touch with my higher self, and I thought, what is that? How do you do that? You know, it was like, how do you break through that spiritual glass ceiling up there, you know, and get to your higher self? And so his name was Charles, and he gave these classes twice a week, every week. And so he started to describe that there were 4 parts to the self. There's the body, which is down here, number 1, and then there's the heart, which is the part of you that feels everything. And then there's the mind, and that's the part that's always thinking. It's always kind of watching out for what's going on. And then there's the observer, which is number 4, which is that part of you that can observe the other 3 parts. And so I thought, well, gosh, I'd never quite thought of that before. You know, I always thought that number 3 was me. I thought that my thoughts were me. And so that was kind of a new thing for me. So when he was talking about the mind, he kind of used this example. And I always love to use this example because it's really great. So imagine that you're driving down the road, and you're on your way home from work or something. And so you're driving down the road. And so here's your mind. This is my mind over here. He's sitting right next to me in the car. And so we're driving along. And all of a sudden we come to a stoplight. And in the stoplight, you know, so we're coming to the stoplight, and so he'll say, oh, look, the light's red, you know, so we better stop, and, oh, look who's on the corner over there. Look, they're crossing the street now. Oh, and look what they're wearing, and look at that other person over there. And I wonder what time it is. And, oh, the light just turned green. Okay, let's go. So I'll go, okay, let's go. So I'm driving down the road, and then all of a sudden I'll think something like, gosh, look at that store over there. I've always wanted to go there, but I've never really, you know, I think I'm going to stop by there today and go. And immediately the mind will probably say something like, what? What do you want to go there for? Do you know what time it is? And don't we have to stop by and make a few more stops along the way? Like, hey, you know? And I'll go, well, thank you, mind. That's really helpful, and I really appreciate it. But, you know, I think we're going to go over there, and it's going to be okay. And so I'll go into the store, and I might run into someone that I was looking for, you know, I had been thinking about for a few days, or maybe I'll find something like a book or something, it'll just fall on my lap, and it'll be just the thing I wanted, you know, and it'll be, yes, you know, my intuition kind of guided me there. And then we'll get back in the car and then kind of go home, and he'll be kind of like, I guess it was okay. So that's kind of how the mind works. It's always kind of looking for it only wants good things to happen, and it wants to prevent all the bad stuff from happening. And it wants more of the good stuff and none of the bad stuff ever. So these 4 parts of the self were really, really a big deal. Now, a little bit about my background is that when I was younger, when I was a teenager, I used to dream about the future, about things that would happen to me. And then when they happened to me, I would remember my dreams, and it would be like, oh, I dreamt this moment already. And it felt kind of like a flash, like just that moment. And I was really curious about how can I know the future if it hasn't happened yet. So I started reading up about psychic phenomenon, and I started reading up about the research that was taking place at that time. And I was just really curious about it. And it went on for years. I mean, at one point, I would get about 30 flashes a day. I mean, that was a kind of a lot. So I told myself that when I got out of high school, I'd go to college and I would study, telepathy and all of that. But there wasn't much going on with that. So I used to also spend a lot of time drawing. That's another thing I like to do. So I could really focus really well. I could spend hours just working on a drawing. And I also used to read a book a day. I mean, I guess I was a real nerd. So when I heard about meditation, I was found that kind of interesting because it was going to teach me something about part of my mind that I didn't know about. So one thing that Charles taught us was the 1-minute power meditation. It was just that simple. And basically what we would do is just relax the body and relax the heart and tell the mind to be quiet, like we're just going to take a time out just for a minute. And then imagine that you're going up above the top of your head and that you're connecting with a beautiful ball of light. Then you go up and you sit inside that ball of light. And you just notice that wonderful feeling inside the ball of light. And the ball of light is a place where there's no time or space, and where there's absolute peace. And you just connect with that wonderful feeling, and you bring that feeling back down into your body. And then you sit with it for a moment, and that's it. And in about, 2-3 minutes, you've done it. And he suggested that we do it 5 times a day. And I did, and so I did. I started scheduling it 5 times a day. And so I was working in an art studio as a painter, and it was easy for me. I was painting sculptures. And so I could easily schedule it into my work. As I'm working, all of a sudden I would mentally do my 1-minute power meditation. And it really changed me over time. But one thing about that is that as I went up and I would integrate that beautiful ball of light back into my body, I would notice that to be able to do that, I really had to deal with a lot of issues that were going on, issues with my body. At that time, I had rheumatoid arthritis, and I'd had it for several years. And my hands were so swollen that I couldn't open them more than that, and I couldn't close them more than that. And it had spread to my elbows, my shoulders, my knees, my ankles, and my feet. And I would snap, crackle, and pop every time when I'd get up in the morning, and I'd have to take hot baths, and it was really bad. And it wasn't until I finally was in Gainesville, Florida, where I was living, that I finally found a rheumatologist and started kind of a maintenance program, taking methotrexate to help control the rheumatoid arthritis, which is a disease of the immune system. It's when the immune system attacks your body. So I was dealing with the pain in my body, and in my heart was, I had a lot of sadness in my heart because I had just made a major change in my life. I'd left a marriage of 20 years. I'd moved somewhere completely different where I didn't know people. And then, in my mind, I was kind of worried, how am I going to make a living at this? I was definitely making less money than I did before. And so I kind of had things to think about. So that's how I felt when I started meditating. So then I started doing an exercise almost right away. And I don't know where it came from, but when I would go to the ball of light, I started thinking, well, if I kept going higher and doing the same thing, maybe I would feel lighter. You know, let's see what that feels like. And I started doing that. And I would just go above the top of my head, above the me that's in the ball of, I'd be in the ball of light, and I'd continue again. And then I'd feel that, and then I'd continue again, and do that again, maybe another couple of times, and sit there. And I would notice that there were different changes as I did that. It was kind of, they used the example of peeling the onion, you know, the layers, and it literally felt that way, like peeling off layers of myself, until my consciousness became really fine and smooth and more lucid. And this was very, very interesting to notice how that did that. And one thing that I realized is that I was starting to see higher beings. And I found that absolutely, at first I didn't know what to think. And it was almost like the presence of other intelligent beings on some of those levels. So I'm going to read a little bit about what it felt like when I first noticed that. So I unexpectedly caught glimpses of etheric beings soaring past me, and I felt their presence and their calm, light joy in my heart, like a sense of lightness that was new to me. And I realized that the lightness of their souls is what is captured in the paintings of angels. The wings in the paintings are figurative wings that represent their feeling of lightness and freedom. And the deep calm and peace I felt in my heart and soul, and the whole being, was the angelic quality that I recognized in them. And there was also delicacy and a lightness about it all. And I understood then what was meant by angels. Now, at that time, I really didn't have any other reference of what to call these beings except for angels, because that's all I knew. I didn't know anything else but that. Now, one thing that I'd noticed is that during meditation, I learned to notice that the feelings projected by the beings that I encountered, you know, they projected a certain feeling about it. And I'd feel them, when I would meet them, I would feel them as a vibration. And it would be like I would see them, I would hear them, I would understand them and know them all at one time. And so I would feel them as a vibration, as a quality of intention that carried information. And I call this feeling a vibrational tone. And the tone is felt as a resonance, like the tone has an effect. So I later noticed that places and objects also carried signature feelings and residual feelings that imprinted from their owners. So for instance, if you buy a used car, you'll know right away that that car isn't really you until you've been driving it for a while. You know, it almost feels like somebody else's car until you finally had it. And the same thing is if you're moving into a new apartment, you know, or a house, somebody else's house, you'll feel that until it finally becomes you. And a lot of that is it's what's imprinted, the energy imprinted from the owners before. And so when I meditated, I was aware of the importance of setting a good vibrational tone that would attract beings of similar quality. And that was so important to really set a good intention when you start to meditate, and set a good tone. And it's good to bring down either a feeling of love, or a feeling of bringing down a light, a pure light, just to set the tone of the meditation. Now, these beings were very light, but I was in for a surprise, because then I ran into somebody else, and I was sitting meditating one day, and all of a sudden this being appeared and came down through the top of my head right into my body, and he felt like he weighed 300 pounds. I mean, it was like the big sumo wrestler here. And it really got my attention. And I thought, oh my gosh, you know, and this presence was very, very serious and very focused and no nonsense. And I thought, boy, that's really different from the way I feel. I mean, there was no doubt that I wasn't imagining something. This was definitely something else. And then he left. Well, I learned a lot about this 300-pounder. And I'm going to read a little bit about him here, just a moment. Because this was a big deal. So I began to learn more about the 300-pounder. And during meditation, I channeled him for the second time. And he was definitely a no-nonsense and serious. That's when I realized that he is, as I would call him, a meditator for hire, in the higher realms. And that was my nickname for him. And I think at this day I realized it may not be quite as respectful as it could be, because he was a pretty amazing being. But I called him, he's the meditator for hire, kind of like a what do they call this? A mercenary meditator. So he displayed a lot of power in his focusing ability. The 300-pounder had a mastery of handling vibrational tones and directing them with power. It was his assignment to practice his talent and teach it to others. I had no way of knowing at this time that he would, in fact, hold much greater role in my development. He was my master teacher. And in the same way that we may play a role with our own families as a brother, sister, or parent, his role was to teach, it was to watch over my development as a parent would. And I'd been assigned to him for him to overlook my development. And he began to teach me techniques of meditation and healing. He also directed other teachers, subordinate to him, to assist me from time to time with their individual expertise. And I learned that all of our teachers and guides and helpers on the other side have their own jobs and assignments, which they have agreed to do for their own continual spiritual growth. And so that's why sometimes, even if we're not talking to people on the other side, we feel a presence that's guiding us, you know, kind of helping us along the way. And those are our guides and teachers. And so while all of this was going on, and I realized that in some way I'd just been living in a fishbowl, and there was a whole lot going on beyond that. And I could start feeling the presence of other beings around me. So I started numbering some of these different vibrations or levels as chakras. I refer to them as chakras in the book, but that's not, it's just whatever you want to call it. So they're like number 8 and number 9 here. So while all of this was going on, I was working at the art studio, and because of competition in China, the business that I worked for, they'd been in business for about 15 years. They couldn't compete in the United States anymore. So they had to move their operation to China and hire, workers to lower their cost. They really couldn't make it anymore. So they let us know ahead of time this was happening. They provided training for other jobs for people that needed it. But for myself, since I had a lot of work experience, I started looking for work. I started looking for another job. And so I did find another job that was kind of interesting here. And I never thought that this would ever happen to me, but here we go. So one day I saw an ad that said, looking for a compassionate person. And I thought, well, that's me. I'm a compassionate person. So I made an appointment for an interview. And of course I was living in that new town where I didn't really know that much, about the town. And I walked in with my most professional dress for success attire, And I'd been led into a conservative office, and I sat in a leather chair. And across from the desk sat a woman with a nice warm smile. And I reached out to her hand and she said, "Hi, I'm Donna." And she began explaining the job to me. I must say that I had no idea what I'd just walked into. She was the head of family services for a funeral home and cemetery. And I listened to her explaining the particulars of the job, and with that winning smile, and I thought, no way. She was obviously enthusiastic about it, but I wasn't. Then she asked if I had any questions. What kind of questions did she think I might have? Maybe I wanted to make arrangements for myself? You gotta be kidding. So how could I talk to anybody about that? So I said, well, I don't know. So she said, well, think about it. If you have any questions, just call me. And so I left, and I was just glad to get out of there. So I went home, and I kept looking for other work. And I started thinking about that nice woman. Someone has to do that job, I thought. I'm really good with people. In some ways, it's really not different from hospitality business. I've handled group sales. I was used to people coming in from out of town, for a wedding or a graduation. Or people that needed organization and direction. And it was usually a hectic time, too. And I enjoyed being able to make their visits smoother. And in a way, it really wasn't all that different. And so I called her back. And she made some time for me, and we went back, and I asked her a few questions. And she gave me more details about the job. So the job would take place at the cemetery. And I'd meet with the family when there'd been a death, and I'd go over the arrangements. And then I'd go over the burial and the burial details, and I'd set the date for the funeral. And then I would talk about their final wishes. And so on the day of the funeral, I'd go by the graveside and make sure that everything had happened the way it was supposed to, and I'd sign the documents for the state. And a month later, I would follow up with them and make sure that everything was okay and provide grief counseling. So after she said all that, I thought, no way, this is just too weird. There's no way I'm going to do that. Well, to this day, I don't know what made me take that job. Maybe it was because I am a compassionate person, and I knew that I would do a good job and that it would feel rewarding. But what I didn't know is that it would contribute a lot to my spiritual development and what followed during the next year. So one of the things that I noticed is that during the funerals, I went to a lot of funerals, and I started noticing the beings that were there. And usually people will show up for at their own funeral. And also started to notice connections with the other side, with heaven. And so during that whole year, I continued meditating, and I continued persevering and using a lot of discipline in my meditation. And as that was going on, I started wondering, is this going to be it for me? Is this what I'm going to be doing forever? And the guides would say, no, no, there's more coming. You know, there's going to be other things coming on next. And so I just kept really working really hard and meditating. And then I started noticing on the different levels that there were different guides, and they would take me to different places. And so one time I had an encounter, and this was really early on, just to give you a feeling of what it feels like to encounter a higher being. And this was a pretty involved meditation here. And during this session, I noticed that myself describing activities that I'd never known possible, using words that were not part of my normal vocabulary, like using words that I'd never used before to describe what was going on. And they just came naturally. And I knew that they best described what I was experiencing. And when I started doing this, I noticed that as I was encountering higher beings that sometimes I felt so high because I was on their vibration that I couldn't remember everything that happened, but it was really amazing. So I started recording everything as it was happening. And I found out later that I could read it back through my scribbling, and everything that occurred was there. So this is an excerpt of that. And again, I was just referring to them as angels because I didn't have any other words for it. So, you are an angel. You entered me and then you turned your face to me in my body. And you have a white face and hair and a robe. And what do I feel? I feel softness. And so I asked him, you're doing something to my light body. You're examining my light body. What are you doing to my light body? I was being given an attunement and a balancing. You're redesigning my polarities, adjusting my light body's polarities to make me more capable of functioning in this realm. How is it going to help me? It'll make you more lucid, I heard. And now I see the angel change color. He was first white, and then he changed to red and then yellow. Now he's turning back to red now. And he moved over to my right side and he's facing me. And he's looking at my shoulder. And he's putting some green rays on it to release the tension there. And now there's putting blue there. And he's equalizing my energy. And I was receiving a healing treatment. He was balancing my chakras. He's now working on the chakras in my head. And I was writing all this down as it's happening. And he's working on the electrical brain patterns. And I feel distorted like a TV test pattern. I wait and allow him to do his work. I try to separate and not use my physical body to think, like my brain, if that's possible. Now I feel sensation in the area of my throat chakra as he moves his energy there also. And I feel the energy he's using on me move downward. And my head is becoming clear and the test pattern's gone. And I see the angel turn yellow, yellow-orange now. And I don't know what he's doing. He's still to my right side. And now I feel the top of my head activated, and I think someone else wants to descend now. And here's another excerpt during that time. So there's someone else in front of me. He's etheric, transparent, very large and carrying me somehow. He's different. He's a guide. He's taking me somewhere, keeping me close to him. I was asked if I wanted to go further a moment ago. I was afraid, but I decided to go ahead. I took a deep breath. The guide is comforting me. He's changing positions. He's facing towards the left. He was facing towards the left before, but now we've stopped, and he's standing towards the right and is standing in front of a portal. He's waiting for permission to enter. Everything's turning white in my head. They want to examine my purity. They're also examining my heart chakra, and I feel the etheric density in my head change. The best way I could describe the sensation of examining the quality of my focus and the frequency of my thought patterns. That's what they were doing. Now it's subsided and I've finished their examination, and I wait. Now I feel focused. The atmosphere is empty of color. Now I know that I'm moving into somewhere else. So during this particular meditation, I encountered 5 beings, and the meditation lasted for 2 hours. So as I was noticing all of these, encountering different teachers, and I was taken to other worlds, and so finally, I was still going to meditation class over at Charles's, and we used to talk about this feeling that we have sometimes that there's something that's coming, but we don't know what it is. And like receiving the calling. And so I felt as though my new life path was a test. And I knew that I had to experience these changes. And I knew that the road might not be easy, and that there are many unknowns ahead of me. And also knew that the outcome would reveal as a great gift. And when you get the calling, it's like, you know what you have to do, you know what you're supposed to do, and you have to see it to its completion, you have to see it all the way to the end. And that you're being given the opportunity to learn, and that the grace is to be aware that that's what's going on. So Charles used to say, the bigger the lions at the gate, the greater the treasure behind it. So the lions were my fears, and the obstacles or the struggles, and the treasure was still to be revealed. So finally, after about working a year at the cemetery, I started getting some news from my guides that something was coming up, that there was going to be a new job for me. and everything would be taken care of. And one day, I was involved in the art community, and so one day I got a call from one of my associates that there was a company in North Carolina that was looking for a designer. And this company did stained glass. And they were looking for someone that could design stained glass windows for churches. All they did were churches. That's all they did. And they did a lot of restoration also. And so I went up and for the interview, and the daughter of the owner had been doing the design work, but she was graduating from college and she was going to be doing other things now. And so they were looking for someone to replace her. And I ended up getting that job. And they paid for my move up there. They helped me find a place to stay. Basically, it didn't cost me anything to move up there. It was just amazing. And so one day when I was, just as I was getting ready to leave, I went to see my rheumatologist. And at that point, she looked at me and she said, you know, your rheumatoid arthritis is doing so well now. You're taking such a small amount of methotrexate that you can probably do without it. And it was like it had gone away. The rheumatoid arthritis was gone. And I was healthy. And so it was just really amazing. And of course I had learned a lot. You know, I continued on even higher, and I had learned to connect, you know, with this beautiful feeling of love. And so when I finally arrived in North Carolina, and I was feeling kind of lonely one night, and you know, I was sitting there meditating, and this is going to be the last passage I'm going to read. So I was sitting there, and I was feeling kind of lonely. And so I began meditating, and I was immediately approached by several high beings, joyful as children. And they announced that they were going to show me something that would allow me to grow and give me new insight. It would be a new realm. And then I saw others that were coming down as from above. It was as though they were coming down from a hillside. And there was a yellow light coming down, and it felt joyous, and there was all this excitement in the air. And so I said, what do you want to show me? And I felt this purple light in my heart chakra, and I felt that my heart chakra was balanced. You'll understand a new depth in your heart, and that's what I heard. Something that can't be learned through your realm of experience. It's a baptism. And I felt peace in my heart, a calm. And then someone was here, and I sense that his role was as a spiritual leader. And then I felt myself being carried above the beings as though in a victory celebration. And I was carried into a yellow realm. And I felt embarrassed because they are the ones that I look up to. What is this celebration? Feel this place, dear one. This is your home. In your heart of hearts, your brothers and sisters are here. All those that have known you since the beginning of time. And there are other realms beyond here, where your identity, where there is no identity, and where we all originate from. but here we are as kin. You are home. Praise God's love for all of eternity. Sing the joy of his creation and existence. Praise the great plan that is perfect and whole. It is beyond words. But there is so much that can be felt through the heart of your highest soul. So peace be with you forever. Welcome. So I looked into this realm, and its light was so bright that I couldn't distinguish all the souls that dwelled in it. It radiated great vitality. It is the intelligence beyond words and understanding. It is a knowing. And I knew that there would be an unbroken thread linking me to that realm from now on. So I often return to this realm filled with so many bright souls, blending into its billions of lights, resonating at a high frequency of joy and pure energy. So we're all on a journey, like all of us are. And there are many twists and turns as we're on our journey. But the meaning of life and who we are and why we're here and what we're supposed to do is probably going to unfold in a lot of different ways during our life. But really the most important thing is just to be who we really are, is just to be the beautiful, pure essence that is part of everything and that is us, and just to express those really special gifts that each of us have. And so I want to thank you all for coming here today, and thank you so much.